Okay, let's unpack this. Get ready, because something big just dropped. Season 2 of Empire and Legacy is here.
And honestly, it feels like the absolute perfect time, a really opportune moment to be diving into this. This season, we're really going deep into what we're calling Africa's finance wars.
Africa's finance wars. Okay, that sounds intense, less like balance sheets and more like, well, actual conflict? What are we talking about here?
It really is that intense. We're talking about the high stakes, often super dramatic rivalries that are fundamentally reshaping banking, payments, fintech, the whole landscape across the continent.
Right.
Imagine these battles happening not just in sterile boardrooms, but on the streets, through lines of code, definitely over mobile phones. It's really about who captures that financial future for millions.
And that's exactly why it feels so timely, doesn't it? You just look at the energy, the sheer amount of investment, the number of people getting connected financially. It's just, well, exploding across Africa.
It really is exploding. And this whole deep dive series, it's designed to be your shortcut through all that complexity. We're going behind the headlines, getting into the nitty-gritty of the strategic decisions, trying to understand the leaders making these, frankly, audacious bets.
And dissecting the big corporate showdowns that are defining everything.
Exactly. We're aiming for less dry annual report analysis and more. Well, maybe like a Netflix-level intrigue mixed with some solid McKinsey-grade insights. Is that fair?
I like that. That's the goal, right? So each deep dive is basically a masterclass.
Yeah, pulling strategy, innovation, leadership lessons straight from the real-world playbooks. These companies are fighting for dominance right now.
And for anyone who tuned into Season 1, we did something similar with tech and telecoms in Africa. If you missed it, definitely check it out. You'll see how we tackle these big, complex industries.
Yeah, good point.
But Season 2, finance wars? I mean, that feels even closer to everyday life, doesn't it?
It touches everyone, absolutely. And the rivalries we're digging into, they're incredibly varied. It's not just tech versus tech. It's about market access, building trust, navigating regulations, and sometimes just sheer distribution hustle.
All right, let's get into it then. Give us a taste of the battles you've uncovered in the source material for this season. Where do these finance wars kick off?
Well, we look at a whole series of really intense head-to-head contests. Each one kind of gives you a different angle on how companies compete and, win in this kind of dynamic environment. Think of them as real-world case studies, but like way more interesting.
Okay. So which ones are jumping out? Where should we start?
You absolutely have to start, I think, with the fight for the digital payments gateway. We dive deep into the fintech frenemies, Flutterwave versus Paystack.
Ah, yes. The two Nigerian giants, both wanting to be Africa's Stripe. That feels like a classic startup showdown.
It does, yeah, but with these unique African twists, we look at their origin stories, that initial scramble to sign up merchants, the cafes, the little online shops, small businesses.
Yeah.
First in Nigeria, then pushing outwards.
Right.
But what the source material really brings out is how dramatically their paths diverged just a few years in.
How so? I mean, they both became huge successes, didn't they?
They did, absolutely. But on wildly different paths. Paystack, you'll remember, they went for the exit, that massive $200 million acquisition by Stripe, the global player.
Yeah, joined forces with their inspiration, basically.
Exactly. And what's fascinating in the sources is seeing the strategy behind that move, the timing, the integration, becoming part of this bigger global thing.
And Flutterwave took the opposite track.
Completely opposite. They chose independent scale, doubled down, raised huge amounts of venture capital, some of the biggest rounds on the continent, actually, and just went for this rapid, independent blitz across loads of countries at once. And the sources, they really show the sheer challenge of executing that. The capital burn involved, the aggressive land grab strategy, and you see the subtle, sometimes not so subtle, jostling between them.
Like for exclusive deals. Or investors.
Yeah, securing deals, wooing the same investors, trying to build different kinds of network effects. It's a fascinating study in two valid but totally opposing high-stakes strategies playing out side by side.
That contrast is really stark. The exit versus just pure scale.
Ooh.
Okay, so from fintech in Nigeria, where does the battlefield shift?
Well, the fight isn't just among the startups. The big traditional banking titans, they're locked in their own strategic chess match spanning the entire continent. We look closely at EcoBank versus Standard Bank.
Okay, so Togo's Pan-African hopeful against South Africa's established giant. Feels like less of a sprint, more of a long-distance race across many borders.
Precisely. The sources let us track their expansions over decades, often overlapping, sometimes directly competing. You see the bidding wars that erupt for smaller local banks trying to instantly grab a foothold in a new market.
And fighting for the big corporate clients, too, I imagine.
Oh yeah, big time. The turf battles for those major corporate clients operating across multiple countries. This isn't just about having the slickest app, it's about navigating regulations in like dozens of places, building local trust, leveraging enormous balance sheets. It's a deep dive into how these legacy institutions try to scale and stay dominant through acquisitions and sheer geographic reach.
Okay, so we've got the fintech disruptors, the big traditional banks. What about the real bleeding edge? You mentioned crypto earlier.
Absolutely. Can't ignore the wild frontier of crypto. It's a battlefield with its own totally unique dynamics. We explore the rivalry playing out between Luno and Binance across Africa.
Right. Luno, the local champion from South Africa, built that early trust versus Binance. The absolute global crypto monster. Feels a bit David and Goliath, but, with blockchain.
It is, kind of. Both are fighting hard for Africa's growing crypto user base, people looking for different ways to save, transact, maybe hedge against inflation. But what makes this battle really intense, and the sources highlight this, is the incredibly fluid, often unpredictable regulatory environment.
Ah, yeah. Navigating those shifting rules, especially in places like Nigeria or Kenya, where crypto's faced crackdowns.
Oh.
That must be key.
It becomes a critical competitive advantage. Just figuring out the rules or lack thereof is half the battle.
And the way crypto companies compete is different, isn't it?
Totally different. Forget glossy TV ads. So much of this fight happens in online crypto communities, through viral marketing, sometimes using influencers or grassroots educational pushes. It's a battle for trust and transaction volume in a space that, okay, it's maturing, but it still has this definite Wild West vibe.
Right.
The sources show winning here isn't just about the platform, it's about mastering community building and somehow navigating what governments might do next.
Okay, let's swing back to Nigeria. Seems like a real hotbed for these finance wars. What's the story with Carbon and Kuda?
This is a really interesting duel within the mobile-only banking space. Carbon, they started out mainly as a lending app, right? Focused on giving out quick loans. Then they kind of evolved strategically into a full digital bank. But initially, their big focus was proving they could be profitable through that lending base.
Okay, so loans first, profitability focus.
Exactly. Kuda, on the other hand, they just burst onto the scene. Super sleek design, zero fee model, raised massive funding rounds, specifically to prioritize just getting users on board, growing really fast, often before worrying too much about immediate profit.
So one goes for loan-driven profit early, the other just blitzscales the user base with a free offer.
Precisely. It's a perfect example of two very different strategic philosophies going head-to-head for the same digital-savvy customers. Both have scaled massively, millions of downloads, hundreds of millions in funding raised between them. But the sources really show how those initial choices shaped everything that came after their challenges, how they compete. Now, the fight is more about deepening those relationships, building trust beyond just the first download, and really defining what a digital bank is for the mass market in Africa.
The powerful contrast in business models playing out right now. Okay, staying in Nigeria, you mentioned a story about a very traditional bank facing a really unexpected challenger.
Yes. Zenith Bank versus Opay. This is like the ultimate legacy meets insurgent narrative playing out in the critical retail wallet war. Zenith, they're a giant in Nigerian banking. Huge assets, established branches everywhere, but suddenly their core ground, the informal markets, daily cash transactions, the street-level economy, it comes under attack.
By Opay, the Chinese-backed fintech that kind of appeared out of nowhere. How on earth did they manage to challenge a giant like Zenith there?
By building a distribution network the traditional banks just couldn't replicate quickly. Opay basically turned motorcycle taxi drivers and street vendors into this massive human agent network. These agents, just using a simple app, could handle deposits, withdrawals, payments right there on the street corner. Faster, cheaper than going to a bank branch or an ATM. There's this one anecdote in the sources about Opay agents literally setting up tables near bank branches, peeling off customers waiting in line inside.
No way. So a network built on motorbikes and market stalls basically ate a bank's lunch. That's incredible.
It's such a vivid example of how clever, on-the-ground distribution and low fees, using existing informal systems, can totally disrupt the big players. The sources show how Opay built this powerful retail brand through sheer hustle and being visible, forcing banks like Zenith to completely rethink their retail game. It's a masterclass in using a unique operational model.
That story alone feels worth the price of admission. Speaking of moving money, there's also a battle focused just on sending cash across borders, right?
Yeah, following the money across borders is huge in Africa. You've got this massive, like, $50 billion diaspora remittance market alone. So here we look into the rivalry between Chipper Cash and Eversend.
Okay, two cross-border payment startups,
Yeah.
both trying to get those users sending money home or between countries.
Correct. But again, different paths. Chipper Cash went for that rapid VC-fueled scale strategy, raised hundreds of millions, raced to launch in like 7 countries almost at once. Eversend, coming out of Uganda, they were more bootstrapped, grew more organically, even used crowdfunding for early expansion.
So different funding routes, same fight for users sending money across often tricky corridors.
Exactly. And the sources reveal their different playbooks. The focus on slick app design, offering multi-currency wallets, and critically, navigating the maze of regulations and compliance in dozens of different countries.
Yeah, that sounds complex.
Hugely. So this deep dive shows how companies with different resources, the lean startup versus the heavily funded scale-up, both have to tackle that red tape and the sheer operational headache of moving money internationally.
And finally, okay, this is a battlefield I genuinely did not expect in the finance wars.
Yeah.
The supermarket checkout line.
This might be one of the most striking examples of disruption coming from way outside traditional finance. We look at ABSA, a major legacy bank, versus ShopRite's money market.
ShopRite. The giant supermarket chain, they're a finance player now. How does that even work?
Well, the sources show how ShopRite has, kind of quietly but very effectively, turned its money market account into a sort of fintech powerhouse. They pour savings, payments, remittances, bill pay, leveraging their absolutely enormous daily foot traffic. People are already there.
So it's like there's a mini bank embedded in every ShopRite store.
Functionally, yeah. This episode really digs into how a massive retailer is using its existing customer touchpoints, the place people go every day anyway, to slide into traditional banking territory, ABSA's territory. It's a perfect illustration of this whole embedded finance trend.
Making every interaction a potential banking moment.
Exactly, which means banks can't just sit back and expect people to come to the branch anymore. The competition is literally waiting for customers when they buy their groceries.
Wow. That really shifts the game. These stories are incredible, so high stakes, packed with drama. It's clear season 2 isn't just, listing company names. It's about understanding the why behind their fights. What core business ideas, what strategies will listeners really get from these deep dives?
Yeah, that's the real value, I think. These aren't abstract concepts from a business book. These are lessons learned the hard way, forged in these actual battles. You'll get this insider view of competitive strategy in action.
Right.
Seeing how intense rivalry doesn't just squeeze profits, it actually forces innovation. How companies use things like exclusive deals or aggressively undercutting fees or pivoting their product fast purely based on what a competitor does. It's learning to see competitors not just as threats, but maybe as catalysts for your own improvement.
And that carbon versus CUDA story sounds like the perfect real-world example of that classic debate. Growth versus profit.
Totally. You'll see the actual results of prioritizing super fast growth with VC money versus aiming for early profitability with a core service like lending. Understanding why companies make those choices and what happens next, that's crucial knowledge, whether you're in a startup or a big company.
And for anyone thinking about going international, the EcoBank Standard Bank fight and the Chipper Eversend one.
Yeah.
Those must offer amazing blueprints for market expansion, right?
They really do. You get the messy reality of scaling across different borders, adapting your product, your marketing, your ops to different rules, currencies, cultures. You see different ways to enter markets, from buying local players to just building from scratch everywhere at once.
And Opay disrupting Zenith, ShopRite challenging ABSA.
Yeah.
That's disruptive innovation happening right in front of us.
Exactly. How does a non-traditional player use tech, clever distribution, maybe focus on a group others ignored, like Opay with street vendors or ShopRite with shoppers, to just leapfrog the big established players? It's a masterclass in finding vulnerabilities and exploiting them with speed and smarts.
You mentioned regulation so many times, crypto, cross-border payments. Yeah. Sounds like a huge pain, but maybe also an opportunity.
Absolutely. Regulatory navigation in Africa is incredibly complicated. Rules change, or they're being made up as they go sometimes. But the winners, They learn to turn that red tape into an advantage.
Now,
Getting licenses, building real compliance expertise, sometimes even using regulation as a barrier to keep slower competitors out. It's about turning a limitation into a competitive edge, a moat.
and at the end of the day, all these fights are for the customer, right?
Yeah.
Millions of users. So there must be huge lessons in customer acquisition and loyalty.
Totally. How do you get millions of users in markets where cash is still king or where trust in banks might be low? The sources show really cool tactics. Kuda's focus on slick UX and zero fees for the digital crowd, Opay's agent network, and low cost for the informal economy. Those viral strategies in crypto. It's about understanding what actually gets people to sign up and trust you with their money.
And beyond the strategies and numbers, these are stories about people, aren't they? They leadership and vision driving these companies.
Absolutely. We look at the founders, the CEOs, the key people making the calls. You see the impact of bold visionaries making huge bets, the diplomatic deal makers sorting out complex partnerships, the grassroots hustlers building networks street by street. Understanding how leadership style, company culture, individual decisions shape the outcomes, that's a critical takeaway. These are real people making tough choices under huge pressure.
It really sounds like these aren't just theories you'd read about. They're genuine, battle-tested strategies you probably won't find taught quite this way anywhere else.
Exactly. They come straight from watching, analyzing, understanding the company's actually doing it, building it, fighting it out on the ground.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. Why should anyone interested in business, strategy, global trends, why can they absolutely not afford to miss Season 2 of Empire and Legacy, Africa's Finance Wars? Give us the FOMO.
Okay, look, this isn't just another business deep dive. This is genuinely a front row seat to one of the most dynamic, innovative, strategically rich business arenas on the planet right now.
Wow.
The financial future of a continent with over 1 billion people is being hammered out in these very battles we just talked about. And the lessons emerging here,
Yeah.
they're not just for Africa, they are applicable worldwide.
So you'll basically stay ahead of the curve on global business trends, seeing them play out first in these super fast-moving African markets.
And you'll pick up practical, tested tactics to outthink your own competition, whether you're in a huge corporation or trying to launch your own startup.
And honestly, just the stories themselves, the grit, the genius, the unexpected twists, they're genuinely inspiring. They'll fuel your conversations, make you that person with sharp insights on emerging markets. They'll just make you smarter about how business gets done today.
Season 2 is really where it all comes together. The strategies, the rivalries, the tech, the leadership. The next wave of global business powerhouses is rising from Africa, and their playbooks. They're basically outlined in this season.
So seriously, don't get left behind on this.
This season is your guide to understanding these rivalries, learning how to scale bold ideas against tough odds, and innovating for what the market will look like tomorrow.
Make sure you subscribe, follow Empire and Legacy on your favorite podcast platform. Be the first one to hear these high-stakes stories when they land. We're already cooking up ideas for Season 3 and beyond, but the Season 2 is the essential next step to grasp the engines driving Africa's economic transformation.
Yeah, tune in. Equip yourself with the knowledge being forged right now in the heart of the finance wars.
And just a quick heads up, the content we discuss in these deep dives is based on publicly available information. Things like news reports, company announcements, public records as we unpack these incredible battles.
So as you think about the clashes we've outlined, fintech versus fintech, banks versus banks, crypto versus crypto, even supermarkets versus banks, just ponder this. In markets changing this fast, with tech and sheer hustle as weapons, can any established player, no matter how big, really feel safe from a clever, determined challenger operating right under their nose? The answer, well, it might surprise you. And it's waiting for you in Season 2.
You've been listening to Empire and Legacy, African Business Chronicles. Our hosts are Zuri Mwangi and Kwame Adeyemi. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, WhatsApp, X, Instagram, and YouTube. All links are in the show notes. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast platform, and share this episode with fellow business leaders. Main episodes are released each Monday. Our hosts delve deeper into the CEOs at the helm on Wednesdays. On Thursdays, we explore the global perspectives, the standout businesses and CEOs, emerging trends, and geopolitical developments, presenting both risk and opportunity. We're back each week, sharing more stories about the exciting business rivalries shaping the future of business across Africa. Empire and Legacy is essential listening for business professionals and leaders. Be sure to subscribe to be the first to know when new episodes are released. Until next time, stay tuned.